Today I will be reviewing a book that I just finished reading last night, which is Black Boy by the author Richard Wright, and I thought that it was amazing. Amazing for a few reasons. First of all, first thing that stood out to me was his writing style. He must have a really vivid memory because his words brought everything he was saying to life. And then when we come to the content of his book, that's where things really take a turn. That's when things really begin to get real because as the title implies, the Black Boy, he was born in 1908, so slavery was over, but only by so much. He was from Jacksonville, Mississippi, which was definitely a city at that time that dealt with a lot of racial issues, racial prejudices, and he talks about his account growing up like that, growing up with that mindset and having to adjust. He was trying to adjust his mindset to the mindset of the world. He didn't understand exactly what made him inferior to white folks. When he became working, it was hard for him to hold down a job because he didn't treat white people as superior as they expected to be treated at that time. He just treated them like a normal person. He was talking to his friend in one part of the book that I think demonstrates this clearly. He was talking to his friend, and a white white couple had walked up, and he just stepped to the side and kept talking. And when the white people left, his friend was like, white people don't like it when you do that. He was like, when they come by, you need to move all the way out of the way. They don't like it when you treat them like other people. They don't like you to have your own mind. Something else that I thought, now I don't want to put myself or my experiences or my personal feelings really into this review, and I feel like I have to say that because reading his book, I felt a lot of parallels to his experiences as well as my own, maybe from a different perspective since I'm not a male, since I'm not a man. I didn't grow up in that time. Reading his book, I'm reading his book over 70 years after it was first written, but things are not as different as you would expect them to be. For one thing, I'm a single mother who is a mom to a black boy, and I can see how the situation he grew up in is not very different from the environment with which I raised my own child. Maybe emotionally, my conscious level might be different than his mom's, but the outside world that we live in now in America is not really changed. Without getting into specifics, I'll say that the changes that occurred from the time this book was written in the 1940s to now, 2015, which is around 70 years or so, the changes are very shallow. Nothing deeply has changed for Black Americans, especially when you get into the psychology aspect of it. Sure, there are some of us who rose to the top. There are Black millionaires and everything, but the masses of people are still not where they need to be mentally to really make a change, and that goes for African Americans, but it also goes for America. Richard Wright, if you happen to have a copy of this book, on page 272, he gives a great analysis of America as not just as a country, but as a personality, as a we'll say as a personality, and Americans' feelings and attitudes towards the people that live in the country, towards us. And of course, he gives a solution of what would have to happen, considering if America was a personality, the type of personality that would have to shift in this country for there to be equality, for Black people to live easily like other people do, for our quality of life in general to be elevated to the status of which we deserve, not having to worry about certain social issues, having certain things in our minds, being discriminated against. It's a whole lot. And he gives, yes, he says this is XYZ, this is what needs to happen. And at the risk of sounding pessimistic, as I read that, I highly doubt that anybody in America that has the power to make the change will be willing, or I just don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening that way. That's not to say that things will never improve for Black people, but it wouldn't happen that way, because it wouldn't happen the way that Richard Wright proposes in his book, because that's a more peaceful way that would cause the powers that be, whoever that is, to really look inside themselves and try to make changes. And it's bigger than just the people. It's bigger than just the citizens. It's bigger than just the politicians. Like, it is, but it's more collective. And I just don't see that type of unity happening, that type of concern for Black people. I don't see that type of concern for us. What they say, we're 13% of the population. I just don't see it happening. Now, that's not to say that Richard Wright is wrong, because I feel like he's absolutely right. And I wish that it could be the way that he outlined. But think about it. His book was written 70 years ago, and all the technology and advances and all the things that we have now, we didn't have back then. Yet the mindset is still unchanged. Not to go too much into the social commentary aspects, because he also talked about his family life. His grandmother was a Seventh-day Adventist, which I will admit my ignorance of that religion, but she was super strict about it, and his home life was not accepting to new ideas. When he would read books, come home with books, they would ask, why are you reading that? And, he'd say because he enjoyed it. And they, when I say they, I reference to his family and the other Black people, I guess the other Black folks that he would associate with collectively. Nobody understood why he was reading books. They didn't understand what he could get out of it. They were like, are you studying law? So if he wasn't studying to be a lawyer or a doctor, they were like, well, why are you reading? They didn't understand that they didn't understand why he was reading, and he also didn't exactly know how to express why he was reading books to them anyway. The things he was getting out of it was expanding his consciousness way beyond what they were able to understand. And I think that a lot of African Americans, especially who want to call themselves in the conscious community, just for the record, I don't like using the word the conscious community, but people who seek to elevate their consciousness will face opposition from those who don't understand. And the more you try to explain it to people, either they'll disregard you because they don't understand and make it sound like you're crazy, and it's frustrating to try to explain yourself to people who just don't get it. So understanding that and understanding that struggle, Richard pretty much drew into himself. He became a little indrawn, self-sufficient from a young age, and he's very thoughtful and introspective. This book is separated into two parts. The first part is his young life, and then the second part of the book mostly is after he is a young adult, with him and his family out of the South into Chicago, and he became associated with the Communist Party. But what I found interesting was that he still faced the same challenges that he had down south, and they didn't trust him just because he was a writer. They called him an intellectual bourgeoisie. They gave him that title as though it was something bad and negative. They didn't trust Richard because Richard didn't think like them. He didn't act like them. He was not like them. Okay, this review is going a little bit longer than I wanted it to, so I'm just gonna let me just finish up by saying definitely recommend. Definitely recommend. This might be the best book that I've read all year, and I definitely appreciate Richard Wright as an ancestor and his contribution. Anyway, that ends this review, and I thank you for watching.